tell my friends stand by me only if I'm right. I come out in triple darkness just to see the light. If I say it once, I guarantee I say it twice. If they want me, I ain't going out without a fight. In my dreams, I'm a killer, but for God, man. Try to play it cool, but it's getting hard, man. Rolling with the real and death to all the frauds, man.
We all have sons. They're now into adulthood, and matters of the heart are important in life, right? And how did we help them? Or what types of things did you keep in mind when you were helping them deal with relationships with the opposite sex?
John, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, where do we start, right, with that?
And don't start telling your own story on the sly.
Backdate the story. Nah, it all starts with again, when they're young, teaching them love and respect people, regardless, right? And that's especially carries over to the opposite sex, right? If you like a girl, treat her well. Up to when I got a college student, I got one going to college. Now I tell them same thing. You treat them with respect, even when they don't respect themselves. Mm-hmm. Even if it's a situation, especially when they get older, as far as somebody at a party and drinking or whatever, and just because that person may not even show self-respect, that don't mean that you disrespect them, Mm-hmm. Man, it's a lot to it, man. We talk about choosing your spouse, choosing a mate, how that can be the biggest decision in your life, and so how to navigate that when you're young. Yeah, it will be the biggest. It can make or break you, right? It can set you back or set you forward, propel you. But yeah, man, it's kind of fun, man, seeing when they're young and they like somebody and having them conversations and, what's grade school appropriate to when you get a little bit older. And then it's still always a challenge in dealing with the influence of music in society as well, right? So what time, what age, what is appropriate. But again, showing love, showing respect, doing you, becoming the best version of you so you can be who you are, so you can be a good mate for that particular lady.
Co-worker, man, this is interesting because this just happened. We were in a Zoom meeting, and I hadn't seen, with COVID, some people I haven't seen in a long time, and I was interacting with this colleague that I hadn't seen for a minute. How you doing? Oh, my daughter in the 8th grade now, she's dating. And I was like, whoa, like 8th grade, I had to find out about this, right? So I was like, she's a single mom with a father that's in the child's life.
Okay.
But you know what I'm saying? It's not like he's absent, but 8th grade, and she has a boyfriend that they started off meeting at the park. Now she lets him come over to the house for an hour and a half, and she was saying one time she went to the bathroom and left the room, and she came back, and the boy's arm was around the girl, right? And so she called her daughter in and said, "Hey, none of that. You can't do that." Right? So the girl came back and said, "Hey, you can't do that." And in my mind, I'm thinking, you are not going to be around all the time, right? And so, but to me, that whole, when you ask when, like 8th grade, and if she finds her way to this podcast, my bad for telling you a story. And I was like, but 8th grade, that seems a bit young to me for a relationship of that nature. But I also can't say I know how to address it beyond just saying, nope, can't happen. Because you can say, nope, can't happen, but that doesn't impact how they feel about one another. And then they might go into a shell. But to me, I didn't set an age. I sort of was governing it based on what I was seeing. And I can't say in middle school, I heard a lot of interest like that it was something was popping off, to that level. So I didn't have to address it like that in terms of putting a deadline or anything like that. And it sort of naturally around 10th grade or something, me started, he was escorting a young lady to a debutante thing, and they started going, started being friends and interacting like that. But I didn't really feel a need to get heavily involved in it until I found out he was acting.
And my family, I was a little more go hard about it. I was like, nah, I don't want to hear nothing about no boyfriend, girlfriend mess. That ain't going down up in here.
That's where the drama comes.
We're not doing none of that. We ain't doing no boyfriend, girlfriend.
At what age was this?
Until they was able to drive. And that's what I told them. I was like, you can go out when you can take out.
Oh, you said this from the onset?
Yeah, from the onset. All right, so this is the funny part. That's how I was, and when Darius was like 15, 16, he was like, I don't know, I got 1932 parents, because he want to do what he want to do. And I'm like, nah, man, when you can take out, you can go out. I'm not driving y'all to the movies. I'm not doing none of that. And you ain't going either,
Right.
Now, I remember that time you and John came to the house and Darius was like 7. Y'all remember this?
Yes.
And I think John asked him, you was like, hey, Darius, you got
My
a
wife was there
girlfriend?
too.
Yeah, you got a girlfriend? And he looked around and he shut the door. He said, I got a girlfriend, but my daddy don't know.
Yeah.
You remember that?
That's what the uncles got to get in and talk to him.
That was a classic.
Yeah, I got a girlfriend, but my daddy don't know. He already knew.
Right.
At 7, I wasn't trying to hear that stuff.
Yeah.
But he already was doing his thing.
Right.
So
Can't stop it.
yeah, no.
Nah, that's that win in him.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about that.
For me, I let my boys come to me with it. You know what I mean? Or come to us rather. With those challenges or what they were experiencing, because my whole thing was like, look, focus on school yourself. Preparing yourself just for you first. Because how could you be? Well, first of all, I was like, look, when it comes to the female, you're going to be responsible. There's a responsibility involved, an emotional responsibility, and so on and so forth. So if you're not even ready, if you don't have yourself prepared and ready, how can you be ready to be or take on the responsibility of her feelings or emotions and that sort of, yes. So they came to me, and I think with Michael, it was just like I said, from school. He was in middle school, like
Okay.
seventh grade, I believe, and I think when he did, and I'm trying to think when I remember how he got to his little girlfriend's house. I'm like, did I sanction that? But if I did, I had to have the conversation of, is it okay with her parents that you come through or come over?
Yeah.
And it's funny because what you said, why they always at your spot, and it seemed like he was always going or invited to be there. And I think from the background though, his I think he did say like her folks were mad religious and ultra religious and everything. So I think that's probably why it was okay with me.
You're mad and ultra religious? No, I'm just saying.
Well, I wasn't ultra, but I was strict and disciplined to the extent of like, knowing human nature and whatnot.
Yeah,
and
right,
so
right.
you just don't leave them unattended and by themselves to trust. Not that I don't trust y'all, I don't trust nature, the nature within you to be attracted to one another. You know what I mean? And so that was with Michael, and then Kemu again. I think we shared that in another a previous episode too, with regards to him betraying his buddy and waiting until they that thing dissolved and he pushing up on old girl, and that was the only thing in middle school for him. But then it wasn't again until high school for Caden that I think he had a bandmate, so he was in band and he he developed the whole friendship piece on their mutual love for band and instruments and all. And it's funny, my wife was more about pushing and the whole thing of relating than I was. And I was like, I mean, just let's let it flow or whatever whatever it is. And when you mentioned something about the debutante piece or what, it was something that they I think they did. I forgot what it was, but I think it was about 10th grade or something like that. That he did take her to that, and we prepared him for that sort of thing. But he didn't really do homecoming or prom or anything like that. You know what I mean? And I think he had frustration with the whole friend zone piece.
It was friend zone.
If you will, yes. I mean, because even despite that little thing that they went to together, he was just kind of frustrated with.
So what'd you tell him?
No friend zone allowed.
When he was friend zone, what'd you tell him?
I was like, hey, that's okay, because that's all you prepared for now anyway. You're not ready to take on.
Clearly, that ain't what he wanted. That's why he was disappointed.
Right. Growing up.
Well, I always tried to make sure I was modeling it in the house.
Right.
That was so. I don't know how much conversation we actually had about love.
Right. Yeah.
And we did have conversations about emotions and responsibility. But I always tried to model a love for their mother in front of them. You know, we all heard it. You know, the best thing you can do for your children is love their mother.
Mm-hmm.
We all heard that.
We don't. Hey, it's not talked about enough. But you're right. I'm glad you said that.
You know,
I don't hear that today that much.
Yeah, and folks are not doing that. But I think there's nothing more powerful than being able to demonstrate a love for their mother, because when they see anything other than that, those begin to become the seeds of distrust and fear and uneasiness, and kids start to develop a fear and a lack of confidence, because now their world is shaken when they don't see that, I believe. So I always wanted to demonstrate that and have them see me
now,
and
when
their
you
mother.
say that, you talking about the affection too?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Got you.
The affection, seeing us sit on the couch, watch TV together, eat together, talk together, laugh together, spend time together, enjoy one another's company. Did you leave the door open on purpose a little sometimes so they could hear? I'm just
crazy.
Man, they really love each other.
That's absolutely not.
Yeah.
No, but like I just always wanted them to see how much I love their mother, because I knew they would then be looking for the same thing, and they would want to do the same thing. And I think that's a big part of why my oldest son Darius is a bit of a challenge in terms of navigating relationship, because he's looking for exactly what he saw his parents demonstrate.
So, yeah.
You know, now my younger son Corey, he play video games for a living. He in the house all day. I tell him all the time, I don't know how you gonna get a woman in here.
He gonna have a gamer chick.
Yeah, he'll get him a gamer chick. It's funny because he just was telling me about one of his teammates who's actually married.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, oh wow, you know, I was just taken
back. Why you say oh wow?
I was like, I thought this dude just played video games all day. Yeah, where you find a woman? But then turns out she play games as well.
Oh,
and
cool.
she was in the gaming world as well. So it's super cool. But I have also just watched, as I think I talked about this one time before, they don't bring the level of urgency to relationships and dating that we did at 16. You know, I think I said this before, every single one of us, renewal date on our driver's license is our birthday. Because as soon as we got that driver's license, we want to get that driver's license, we get a car so we can go pick up
get a girl.
So we go get a girl.
Yeah.
That's what we all was on that.
I think I'm gonna reflect off the last little piece. You think about love and then a deep like, and then you think about young people, like, you know, did you kiss this young lady and now you feel like there's something there, and now she might have said I love you, because we know a lot of times women come from an emotional side, and then you in return say I love you too, just because you don't want to leave her hanging, so to speak. Hurt her feelings.
Make her feel rejected.
You know, do you feel pressured into saying love, and then y'all use it, you know, back and forth freely, you know, without the real intimate, like, you know, the real, like you say, are you willing to put your life on the line, you know, and, you know, you just use it real casually. But I wanted to say that right there. But like, for instance, like my son, I always wanted to prepare him to be the best person he could be in a relationship. I want to make sure, you know, he know how to cook, clean, provide, make money. I want him to, you know, so when he leave our house, you know, he'll be equipped to be able to take on these tasks, you know. Some of the things, like my brother said before, you know, we not putting emphasis on love, but demonstrating that in the house, you know, being a prime example of, you know, what it looked like to be in a healthy relationship. And then, you know, so those things is very, very important to, you know, my family, just being able to display, you know, what's going on, you know. So been married 27 years, and he can see And like my brother said earlier, my wife and I, we don't get to argue. I think we've been in more arguments since we had this podcast.
Them throughout the show, but like the first one I'm thinking of is just as my kids were young, I oftentimes did not appreciate the stage of life they were in. And I was always rushing to get to the next stage. And as a result of that, my kids, they grew up super fast on me. And I never really truly appreciated when they were in kindergarten like I should have. I never truly appreciated, when they went off to school for the first time or when they first got to high school. I just didn't appreciate all the different stages because I did not recognize that the joys of watching your kids grow up, that each individual stage has its separate pleasures. You know what I mean? So as you watching your kids grow up, like you might be feeding them fast or just anything, man, just not really appreciating all the stages as they were growing up and just accelerating the process. And so as a result, I think y'all used to tease me, like my oldest son, Darius, y'all would tease me like, man, Darius an adult,
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Y'all would be like, yo, like when Darius moving out and he 8, but a lot of that was because I was accelerating his maturity and all of that just because I wasn't patient as a father, and that was unfair to him. So I created this, me and my wife, unconsciously, just in looking back, we created a little adult who was 8 years old and mature beyond measure, and so that was just, it was unfair to him because we didn't allow him to be a child in all those stages as he was growing. But it was unfair to us too because I think, personally, didn't get to enjoy watching them be 7, watching them be 10, watching them play sports for the first time. And when they start playing sports, next thing you know, you're thinking about, well, what you gonna do in high school? He's 10. Why are you worried about that? And when they're in high school, where you going to college? What we gonna do when you get to college? How we gonna do that? Bro, enjoy his high school year.
Why do you think, as black men in particular, or black and brown men in particular, that we want to rush that process with our children? Why do we want them to be so grown? That's what old folks call it, grown. You weren't describing it as that, but why do we want them to grow up so fast? What contributes to that?
Well, I think not in our case, but I think oftentimes when mom and dad might be working or single mom working, and he gotta hold it down while I'm not here. I gotta leave him at home by himself for the first time when he like 7. And so I think as a result of just working and trying to take care, oftentimes we'll accelerate, have them cooking and cleaning and doing all that stuff. And we talked about that before in one of the other podcasts. But those are socioeconomics that contribute to that. But that wasn't the case in our house. I think it was, I just had in my mind, I'm trying to raise this perfect little minion, and I want him to be like this, and I want him to do this and go here and do that. And as a result, it was just, I think when you had your first kid, everybody can tell you, how you raise your first one and how you raise your middle one or your last one is just very different. And obviously they get different parents at different stages because we grow differently. But I think that's a big part of why we do that.
No, I agree 1,000% because subconsciously, I hate to use a wildlife analogy, but however, some of them things, some certain animals got to be born ready to run because them predators gonna get you. So sometimes subconsciously, when you raising young black men, you got to be prepared, or them predators gonna get you. And so you be like, let's go, and it's completely unconscious.
That's real.
That's
real.
what I wanted to get to because
that's real.
I read something, I don't know where it was, but it said, don't focus on giving your children everything you have never had. Focus on teaching them what you never knew.
Oh man, that's good.
Right? And so that's part of it for us as coming from oppressed people, with socioeconomic challenges or not. Like, back to your predator analogy, it's like it's a cold world out here. I got to teach you to be tougher than you probably really need to be.
Right.
I got to make sure you know all of this stuff that you really don't need to know till you about 17. And you putting a lot of pressure on them to comprehend some things in the name of, I got to toughen you up and get you ready, that takes the childhood away from him. Remember Michael Jackson said, "Have you seen my childhood?"
Yeah.
In the song?
Absolutely.
And he was talking about, being a child star. You never got a chance to just be a vulnerable child that doesn't know, that doesn't need to consider all of these larger issues of life that you may not even comprehend. And I just wonder, as a parent, like the challenge is, and I wanna back you off from being disappointed about it.
No.
Because we all know none of us had a map. And not that you're supposed to get a map, but you were doing the best you could at the time when you were immature and growing. At 19, your brain wasn't even finished developing yet, as we've been talking about.
Right, absolutely.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So that hindsight is always 2020, especially when you care. But James, what are your thoughts about the biggest challenge as a parent?
I think, as we kind of touched on it, with stages of parenthood, or depending on, again, the first child versus second, third, or whatever, I think each child may pose a challenge. Looking back for myself as a young parent at 17, I had no clue. Of course, you know what I mean. I wasn't even thinking. I was still being parented. You know what I mean? By my mother, you know what I mean? So the challenge, that was my first challenge as a parent, is really just not even knowing what it was about.
And I think you was 17.
Yes, sir.
Mama was 33.
Yeah.
Right.
34.
Yeah, 34. Right.
Yeah.
And I think we had mentioned this before as well, because again, I had no clue as far as parenthood with my oldest, Michael. Then married when I married young, about 21, 22, 23, and came into an immediate or instant family, because she had 2 children when we married, and then I had my son, as well. And so that challenge, just trying to balance that blended family piece, was a challenge. And if I had to point out one thing, I think that's consistent with what I've experienced, is the blended family piece. And so with my second, my daughter, Nadira, and then my youngest, Caden, from my second marriage. Again, the blended family piece, because then I've since divorced and remarried, and though the blend, and so him coming into my third marriage now, current marriage with Steph, hey there, it was a bit of a challenge. However, I think I said this in the previous episode as well, that I did my best. I'm doing my best parenting now, but I did my best parenting at 30, because that's when K-Moo was born. 30. And then I was at 22, 21. Then of course definitely at 17. So, but if I had to point out one thing, it would be
blending.
The blended family piece, being my biggest challenge, and that's just tough. If tough on the child, tough.
Why is it tough?
Well, for one, the divorce piece.
Okay.
It was tough, probably for Caden. And then I wouldn't say it was so tough, because Steph's son, Courtney, he was older, much older when we married. And so it wasn't, that tough. But then Caden being young, I think he was about 5 or 6 when Steph and I married. And just, kind of adjusting to, this or whatever we call it now, the bonus parent, or whatever the case. And I think she had said from the onset, she said if Caden had been a little younger, she wouldn't have messed with me at all, because she almost had this thing of a certain age of children, or that she wanted. Yeah,
you made
the
cut.
Yeah, you made the cut. And so and she probably, I think she says she kind of gave me a pass in a sense, because she probably really wouldn't have messed with me
Luckily, you turned the charm on.
Charm.
John, so you're in a co-parenting situation. Do you? I'm not asking you if that was your biggest challenge, but do you co-sign what James is saying about the difficulty?
Man, one thing I annoy the heck out of me as a person, just having a very selfish person, like my son, if he's very selfish, that would have drove me nuts. And so by him being the only child, sometimes that might drift into being, very selfish because you don't have to share with no one, So it was very important for my wife and I to like take him to, homeless shelters and stuff and expose him to, mothers and children homeless shelters. And we did a lot of volunteer work. And, and then when we got home, we talked about it and we shared these thoughts. And I mean, he was handling himself very well. And I just wanted him to understand that, just because, you don't see these things don't mean these things is not occurring in other people's lives.
Right.
And so that way you'll have, passion, be passionate about, your mission and not being so selfish and thinking about the next person and stuff. So we did that for a while. And then he got a part of this program at school when, that was an assignment that they did, went to the shelters and fed the homeless and stuff like that. And he really, really enjoyed it.
He already had the experience.
He had the experience, and so I was just, definitely, that was just one of my things. I was like, man, how are we gonna teach him how not to be selfch?
You saw it coming and dealt with it as it was coming.
That's
like,
why did you feel like he was gonna be selfish? Or what led up to that?
I'm not gonna say I think he was gonna be selfish, but at the same time, I've seen a lot of single, with children with no siblings.
Only
child, right? And I watch how they move, and I was like, man, they good kids, but boy, I tell you, they selfish as can be.
Hold on. What you
I'm talking about you, John.
Talking about you.
And so you gotta teach them how to love. You gotta teach them how to think about other people and stuff like that.
The world can start to revolve around them.
That's powerful though, because a lot of times when we do get our children to volunteer, we participate in that stuff. Even though we know it's a great act, we like, hey, we got to give back. We usually leave it at the message that we got to give back. It's not about, like to Khalik's pointing out, it's not about giving back. It's about using it to parent.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful thing because how can you not, unless you just born the devil, how can you not be compassionate as a child if you got exposed to service?
When my son got to middle school, being that we live in the city, man, I had one of my challenges was how to teach my son how to protect himself. Because when he got to middle school, I didn't know at the time that the middle school he was at, they were like gang related, like they were recruiting at that age, and I didn't know until I was speaking with his barber, guy that cut my son's hair, and he was telling me that one of the police officers that you come in and get his hair done, or, get his hair cut and stuff, that he was saying, man, that school, such as, he was calling out the school name and stuff, and he was like, man, they got a lot of gang going on. I was like, what? And I never seen it, I never seen like the colors, the tattoos. I didn't see any signs of it at school. But however, it was definitely heavy. But and then I was like, man, how do I teach my son how to protect yourself? And so it was this one kid that used to pick on him all the time. When he got to 6th grade, I was like, man, look, we can't have this going on. And him and his, my wife, we was talking, and we said, maybe we should put him in karate. She said, well, maybe we ought to put him in karate. And I was like, nah, we ain't putting him in no karate. She was like, why? I was like, no disrespect, but karate teach all these mannerisms and all this nice stuff. And you never ever get a chance to chop somebody. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, nah. I mean, like they teach a heck of a level of discipline. And you thinking, when you gonna use this stuff? And I see, when I was younger, I seen when my brother was in karate doing it, and I was like, nah, we
didn't
not
work for your brother.
Well, hold on. This is the thing, because Joaquin, in the other episode, we were just talking about Joe Mallory.
Yeah.
Teaching
Kari how to box.
Right?
Yeah. But Darius did karate.
And Darius did karate, but Joaquin was saying that the karate gave them confidence, knowing that they could protect themselves.
Just the belief.
It sounds like I don't need to at least get a chop or two on.
Nah. Let me tell you something. First of all, as a parent, man, we never want nobody to touch our babies. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't care how old they are; they still babies.
You one of them grown-ups that'll fight a kid?
So what? So this is what I told them. I said, nah, we not putting you in karate. By the time they teach you that first move, man, this dude gonna slap you again. We ain't doing that. So it was a boxing gym around the corner. Man, this first day in the gym, man, they were teaching them how to throw a two-piece. You know what I mean? And that's just throwing, your right hand, your left hand. And I said, yo, we on our way. And so he was in class for like a week. And got to school. Here come the bully. You know what I'm saying? He wanted to test my son. And I think he slapped him in the head or do something to him. My son caught him. Wop, wop, right? When he caught him, at the time, I didn't even know all this was going on. So the teacher, when we had parent-teacher conference, she said, we had a little incident earlier in the week. And she said, by the way, your son got a really nice two-piece. I said,
12 of them being sons and have been married for a combined 100 years. Just coming to you talking about parenting primarily and giving you some ideas on not how we raise our children so you can do it that way, or not telling you what to do, but just how we did it and chopping it up about that. I'm joined to my right by John J.G. Yates, over in the middle, all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, Talik Wynn. We got the world's ambassador, Charlottesville's unofficial mayor, Joaquin, and brother Jay Moo over there on the side. And today we're going to be talking to you about a topic that's very serious, but something that, is a great information to share and discuss on what we taught our children about dealing with death, which is an inevitable reality for all human beings on this earth. So very important topic, kind of somber, but nevertheless something that we all have to deal with. So fellas, just in general, who'd like to chime in on some things that you kept first and foremost when teaching your children at any age about dealing with that inevitability?
Who wants to go first?
Joaquin.
It's perfect that we actually started with this particular subject, and I in particular wanted to wear this particular shirt for this topic. So rest in peace, Devin Chandler, Deshaun Perry, and LaVelle Davis. We lost those three young men at the University of Virginia, football players, which is our local team. And, that was just an absolutely heartbreaking moment for the city and for people around the world, and what happened with them with the shooting on the bus. And so I just wanted to, first of all, pay honor to them and just talk about, as we experienced that, what we experienced in this community as a loss. It was so devastating as a community. I remember that day where, they didn't quite know what a murderer was, and we, they had shut down schools and all that stuff that particular day. And so that was just a really challenging time, man. And to just see how the senseless violence touched our community, but to then have to have that conversation with our sons who are older now, they're in their 20s, they're men, but how that was just a really difficult challenge. You know, I think about being in the game and just sitting, 30 feet from those guys, not too long ago and seeing them play. So that was just really, really tough. And so the biggest message that I tried to take away, because it makes no sense whatsoever. It makes no sense whatsoever. But it's like, man, this is what we're dealing with this again. We're dealing with this again. And I want to make sure, the point I want to make here is when these things happen, that we just don't turn the other page and treat it as, oh, well, just another thing, that we don't start to harden our hearts when things like this happen. Yeah, we can't become desensitized to moments like this. So whether it's a public thing that happened publicly or whether it happens internally within our own families, because violence touched many of our families as well, we want to make sure that when we have these conversations with younger people, that we don't harden our hearts and become desensitized to moments like this. Right. And that we really, really, really take the time to go through the legitimate grieving process. And if people don't know and understand the 5 stages of grief, I would recommend it. JJ, everybody was upset, like,
I'm trying to figure out,
because they were young. Iconic moment of good times of TV history for us, because for all of us that didn't grow up with our biological fathers, our father James had died. Right? James was right, but that's real talk. But dealing with recognizing everybody has their own process and not judging it. Like death, we get to own how we deal with death as individuals. And one question I was gonna pose this to James when we think about it, like kind of before we talk about the advice. What was your first experience in dealing with death, James, and how did that inform how you view it today?
It's funny you asked that, because I was sitting here thinking, I was like, mine that I can recall, at least vividly, was my grandmother on my mother's side when she passed, and how that kind of affected me. You know what I mean? And when I was told, and I think I was at my auntie's house over in I forgot the name of those apartments, but anywho, and I think at the little park over there, and I'm not sure if my cousin came and told me, but I was kind of devastated, and just like, I guess, kind of going through those stages, like, not believing it. And I'm trying to think if the family kind of had us, nowadays it's like, if you have like elderly people that's in either sick or in the hospital or something like that, and the doctor will tell you, oh, it's time to bring the family in. It wasn't like that back in the, say back in the day.
Right.
What was that, 80s, 70s, late 70s, 80s. And so it was just like this news that came, where I guess I felt a little kind of bothered that it just, that we weren't given that opportunity to just kind of, be around my grandmother before. It's just one day she's here and the next day telling that she's gone, and and dead. So it's like, so that was my earliest and the first experience that I recall. And so, it was just.
What would it be important for you to teach, your young men today?
To do that, to have them involved even in the stages, in the stages of if they're sick or, or ill in some sort of way, to where if they're deteriorating or whatever the case may be, just kind of let them be a part of that process to I think make it, I wouldn't say easier, but a little better and more acceptable, because you kind of see and you're a part of, as you said, that inevitability.
Yeah.
In the process that, grandma, grandpa, whoever, auntie, great auntie, or whoever is getting, not well, organs shutting down. So, they may not be here much longer, or so on and so forth. Right. One of the important things I do want to pass on to is with that of the medical piece, and they call comfort care and that sort of thing, is to not go by that in every case or scenario. You know what I mean? Because
what do you mean the comfort care? You talking about like
hospice?
Being in hospice,
exactly. That's what I was about to get to.
Not go by that. You mean don't necessarily just automatically put your people in it?
Exactly. Accept that, because the few instances that I do recall, as an adult though, was when my uncle passed, Uncle Doc. Shout out.
Rest in peace, Doc.
Yes, indeed. He, it was, we were there in the process when he was, wasn't well, and you can kind of see, and it's the same with grandma, with Nanny. You know what I'm saying? You can see where they become emaciated and deathly looking. You know what I'm saying? Whereas then when they recommend that says when they do that and they just they're going to administer them that morphine like daily or whatever. Yeah. That's how they can tell, you know what I'm saying, give you a day. Or, you know what I'm saying? Right. Because they're counting on that administration of that morphine, basically just killing people, euthanizing them, basically, in essence.
Yeah, because usually when they do that, they also remove all the medications that were sustaining them and all of that.
And so they're just straight, slowly just killing them. And again, I get that if they're at that age. Grandma, she wasn't, my wife's grandmother, she was not at that. Yeah. And so knowing what I know and with my father and everything, not that they were just listening to me alone. I said, no, don't let them do I say, if they, whatever hospice care they do, they want, and then plus they was all in agreement to let her come home and whatever hospice they were going to send over or have, it'd be very limited. It wasn't the administration of morphine or anything like that. She lived for another 6 months.
Wow.
When he's talking about giving her a week at the most. And the family took care of her. Yeah. The family was there to just do what they needed to do. Yeah. I think
that's real.
I think when they, at the time, towards that 6 month period when we could kind of see she was in pain and that sort of thing, they did allow them to administer a little, not whatever they was talking about giving. And that's what they was like, well, how much would you normally get? And it was like at a particular dose and amount that they did. But, that's not necessarily took it out. It's just, then became somewhat of a natural, more of a natural piece.
What's interesting about that is, and most of our elderly people, they want to pass at home. Right. They don't want to be in any facility. They want to be at home around loved ones. So, unfortunately, I know when my wife's grandmother passed, probably around, it was shortly after the pandemic as well. I don't know if that was 2020 or not. I can't remember the exact year. But, a lot of the decisions in the hospitals are made for insurance purposes and stuff like that. Like those doctors are told you can't keep them here based on insurance. They're making financial decisions in a lot of cases.
Right.
Yeah. When they decide to let them get up out of here. Or the doctor's just like, I'm tired of dealing with this. They're not going to make it back. And not even thinking necessarily about the comfort if they got some more time.
But I didn't mean to cut you off, but another point is sometimes the patient themselves, is not doing necessarily what, of course, when they're at the doctor office, they going to give them what they're supposed to give them.
Right.
But the patient themselves is not doing what they supposed to do. And so sometimes they like, you know what, you ain't doing what you supposed to do. This is what I'm thinking. You ain't doing what you supposed to do. I'm going to give this kidney or this liver, whatever, to somebody.
Toxic is when it is in violation of a female. When you think, here's toxic masculinity, and we all understand this. As a young 17, 18, 19-year-old man, we think masculinity is finding how many women we can sleep with. Right. That's toxic masculinity.
Yeah, right.
At its fullest.
Right.
That is toxic masculinity at its fullest. So when then, so there are degrees of this. And so I think where we struggle as 50-year-old men, and probably just men in general, is where is that line? I don't know if you guys saw, I remember in the 70s, if you got an earring, that was perceived to be feminine thing.
Especially if you had two.
Yeah, if you had two, you was gone.
Yes, sir. Basically, back then, if you had two, everybody said he gay.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right. And so, hey, was it the gay thing? And now, we're into a new time, and to look negatively upon being gay is toxic masculinity now. you know, because, you know, we in a society now where all of this is changing in terms of how we look at it and how, you know, the masses of people are accepting of LGBTQ community and all of that stuff. That's where we start to figure out where these lines at.
Can I dig into that? Because this is a good starting point because
hold on real quick before we get too far away, because I wanted to throw this in on the whole earring thing back in our day. It used to be the rules to that too. If you had one, right? It had to be on the left side or something like that at first. If you had one,
right,
and then after that, it evolved and said, okay, it could be on either side or whatever. And then if it was two, yeah, it was something kind of like, oh, you know, but come on now, y'all getting out of damn control. You're trying to be like women in that, because women wear 2 earrings.
Because you were told it had to be on the left
and then
side.
it had to be like a little stud, a little dime. You know what I'm saying? Couldn't be no loop or hoop.
You was going too far with the loop.
Anything dangling, you know.
And why did you wear that? Why did you get that earring?
To be cool, try to be cool.
Cool for what?
For the women.
Oh, okay.
Because they're toxic masculinity we're talking about. And so see how many we get.
Exactly. Yeah. So why clarify what you just said though about getting a bunch of women, right? That you're saying that's toxic, right?
Yeah.
So what if we got a bunch of phone numbers, right? But we didn't do damage to them. Was that toxic? Because I think something innate in
that's the beginning. That's
step one.
That's the breeding ground of it.
That's just step one.
That's the breeding.
But is that not something innate? But
that is an example of you and us when we competing as 12, 13-year-olds trying to show our
how many numbers
machismo and how attractive we can be to young lady. That's us competing. Now we're not taking it to the sex level because we in 7th grade. You know what I mean? But you know, by the time we 17, it's a different ball game.
Hoping all of them come through. It's not like it's like, oh, I'm gonna get one. I got 10. Once I get one, I'm good. Right. That wasn't how it was going.
Yeah.
So I think we all agree that you know, having a Wilt Chamberlain list of women don't make you a man, right? However,
we agree with that now that we got some sense.
Right.
I'm not so sure a whole lot of people agree with that when we was.
You thought Wilt Chamberlain, you was like, man, he balling in a whole nother way.
Right. So we agree that that's toxic. I guess my question was, it's still something innately in us, right? That wants to chase women. And what's wrong with
that? But is it innately in us to chase all of them?
Or one?
See, but the thing, I found that his
the whole herd.
view of toxic.
Let's just be honest. Like, say if you choose not to be sexually suggestive, we have clothing designers though that design clothes that make you dress socially suggestive, that are available for you to buy and that get marketed as being the end thing to do. You have, for example, if you have someone that chooses, I'm just gonna say a drug abuser lifestyle, right? Your children could get around them and be suggestive to them that that's okay, that's normal, right? So those people would say, if you're anti-drugs, you're toxic. Do you understand what I'm saying? So to me, we reserve the right to choose what we want to teach our children and to not let society and its social constructs carry more weight than the values that we want to teach them. And so when they brush up against that, people could say, hey, that's toxic. But in actuality, it's really just a difference of opinion and the values I try to espouse. So let's say if I believe that it's a man and a woman, that's what a relationship is, right?
Right.
And it's not that I'm being toxic when somebody chooses otherwise, but those are the values that I believe how life should best be lived. And since I have a child and I'm molding my child, it's okay for me to say to them, this is what I think is socially acceptable without somebody labeling you as anti-anything, as long as, to me, again, you're not disrespecting people's individual rights. See, it's a difference to me of saying I have a difference of opinion about your choice than saying I'm going to judge and mistreat you and castigate you over it.
Of course, right. So, that was the racial analogy I was going to use earlier, right? So if someone, and this may be controversial, son, if a white dude say I want my daughter to date white boys on, and that's or I'm sorry, if a white person say I prefer white women, right? or vice versa. I prefer black women, this, that, the other. You can have your preferences. I don't think anybody has a problem with that. However, if someone
a lot of people got a problem with that.
They do.
I don't think it's a problem if you have a preference. I think there's a problem if you have an exclusion, or if someone dates someone of the opposite race, and then I disown you. I'm not going to deal with you no more. And like you said, I'm going to disrespect you. Yeah, I'm going to disrespect you. I'm going to ostracize you because I don't agree with that. There's a difference to me. You can have your preference. I think hey, everyone has a preference. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Without it being mislabeled or misinterpreted. Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
I even hate the whole homophobia term, and I think it was a comedian, my man. Is it Godfrey?
Maybe.
When we saw him in I forget
Richmond.
Yes. And I wish I could pull it up or see it, but he kind of described that whole notion to be so inaccurate as well. And when I find it, I'm gonna share that one.
Because a phobia is a fear of something.
Exactly.
So people are saying if you
don't like it, you fear it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Or if you don't
embrace it,
you fear it.
yeah.
Talik.
I just think people just changing the terminology of some of the meanings that once had this meaning and now got another meaning. I mean, even some as far as hashtag, right? My son and I, we went back and forth forever. I was like, that's a pound sign, right? He was like, that's hashtag. I'm like, man, y'all always changing stuff.
Yeah.
So something as simple as that, right? Their generation is always changing things, and I'm saying that I'm, hooked on back in the days, but at the same time, man, I just tell my son, look, this is how a young man, should carry himself.
How?
What? Huh?
How should he carry himself?
Well, I'm about to say. I was about to elaborate on it. You know what I'm saying? But like I remember when he was doing something when he was little. I say, hey, little boys don't do that. And I was like, and then I can't remember exactly what it was, and he was like, huh? And then I said the reason is because, and then I started explaining stuff to him and stuff. But at the same time, man, I'm like, look, carry yourself as a gentleman. Be nice and be respectful to young ladies. I teach them how to, open doors and be polite and stuff like that. But, somebody gonna always disagree with you on earth. That's not your responsibility. You're not gonna be liked by everybody.
You said something about education, and I got it. I've been developing this thought, been growing in my mind. When you look at the decline in reading scores since the 1960s, when we had pure music, and even the 70s, if you didn't go to college, you were still graduating very literate in the 70s and 80s, right? If you look at the decline of reading scores, you see the decline of lyricism in hip hop.
There's
Do
a
you understand
correlation.
what I'm saying?
There's a correlation.
It's a direct correlation.
Yeah.
I might be the first one coining that. But real talk, Jay-Z, Nas, Lil Wayne, Biggie, go back and read the history that they were all good English students.
And Kanye and his mother.
Go back and read the history. These dudes with language, they had gifted with language. And so Rakim, all of his lyrics, no cursing, fit perfectly into those bars with the amount of syllables he was using. So now we went from metaphors and analogies to the lowest form of comparison, which is a simile. You like this, I'm like that, as opposed to double meaning and all of this stuff. Now it's uttered phrases. Come to my gun, da 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 da. It's shit is like nursery rhyme, right? Because there is a decline in education, to your point.
Wow.
And so the consumers in our community of hip hop, they don't value lyricism anymore because I'm not at that language level. I don't even know what you're talking about when you're doing metaphors. Go ask the same
metaphors and allegories.
that
I'm
love
lost.
the phrasal music, which is drill, trap. Go ask them, put a metaphor on them on a test and tell them to break the metaphor down. They don't have the language skills.
Wow.
Right? I might not be popular for saying this, but I'm a student of the language.
And
a
teacher.
I can say this, right? There has been a decline that is reflected in the quality of the lyricism and poetic genius of the music.
And I won't stop until I'm winning. I'ma show them how true and independent get it. Business handled in a minute. And I won't stop until I'm winning. They don't want me in the office, cause I